Indianapolis runs tomorrow.
You're that fly. Feel that fly will get you. Fly will get you.
Go. Then to use the editing. I mean, the class is like $75, but using an editing studio is like $120 an hour. So I'm like, I'll just I'll take the class, and then that way I have unlimited use of the editing equipment. So, but anyway, so what I'm doing is I'm doing just kind of all the stories that you guys used to tell me about growing up and having the family and all of that. And so I'm just going to put it on camera, and then later I'll edit it all together. So the part where I want you two together is to talk about how you first met. So,
Do you remember how we first met?
Hmm?
That was a long time ago, wasn't it?
What?
How we first met? Gee.
Well, yeah, I remember that fairly well.
where was it?
Well, my first view of your grandma was that she had come up with this girlfriend there, who was a friend of my friend, a girlfriend of a friend of mine, Howard. So Howard, he was over at my house, so he went across the street because Dorothy and your grandma was standing over there on the sidewalk. And he wanted to see what Dorothy wanted, so I was standing in the front room, and I had the shades down because the sun was coming in the front room, I look out underneath the shade, and all I could see over there was a pair of very shapely legs, because your grandma was wearing one of them sunsuit things, And being the curious sort that I was, I kind of wanted to see what was standing on top of them legs. So I did. We made a date, I guess it was, we went down to Lucille's place, and
We went down there and put a crossword puzzle.
putting a crossword
jigsaw
puzzle together. Yeah.
Jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah, jigsaw puzzle together. And you know what? We went up to Howard's house, wasn't it? To have some cocoa or something.
And make candy.
Huh?
Went up to Howard's place. We was going to make candy. They wanted to make candy, but nobody knew how except me.
Yeah.
I made it the old-fashioned way, where you put sugar in a pan and pour the chocolate and then the cream, and then you stand and stir and stir and stir. I made some chocolate fudge for them. And we danced and we listened to the music, and it was just a nice little get-along until it was time to go back down to my sister's house, and your grandpa went and walked me home.
Yeah, well, we were going down the sidewalk, and I kind of had one arm over here around his shoulders like that, and I was kind of impressed with your grandma, I thought that's pretty nice, But we got down there almost to her sister Lucille's house, and I had a sudden inspiration, I asked her, I said, "Have you ever looked up at the Big Dipper?" And so when she looked up at the Big Dipper, well, of course, tilted her head back, put her in the proper position, so I could give her a great big bus right on the lips. And she didn't take unkindly about it. She thought that was pretty nice, too.
Did you?
Well, he was known as the rowdy of the community that we lived in. He drove a little car, and everybody, when he'd come home from work, then everybody would run out and pull in their kids because that rowdy Farnsworth boy was coming up the street. And so I thought, well, you know, there's a good chance of practicing reforming.
I always felt that was kind of an undeserved reputation. So I drove my car down the street one time without the exhaust pipe on it. Yeah, I guess they did take kind of dim view of that. So I went back and put the exhaust pipe back on. It was a muffler.
Yeah, and he was always driving up to my sister's house, and then he'd stop and turn the key off, and then turn it back on real hard, and it'd pop and snort and buck and.
Well, it backfired. Pow! You know.
And I knew who it was.
Yeah, well, it was, you know, sort of a here I am thing, you know.
So what did your sister think of him?
Well, she didn't. None of them liked him at first, except my nephew, and he liked him because he built model airplanes.
Yeah.
And flew them, and Tommy he liked airplanes, so he figured, well, if I'd get in good with your grandpa, that grandpa would give him some of these airplanes.
Well, I never did. Yeah, we were into model airplanes pretty heavy at that time. Just getting into gas models, you know, remember that? He was.
So from the first kiss, then how long did it take before you actually? What was
I met him in July and married him in December.
What was the proposal like?
Well, he was. What was it?
By golly, I don't remember too much about that part.
Oh. Wasn't it Bob Johnson, our real good friend, or
yeah.
He was going to go into the service, and so your grandpa he was talking about it too, and I told him, I said, well, not before we get married.
So you proposed.
So I guess I proposed, and he took me up on it.
I guess so, yeah. Somehow or other. Anyway, it made the consummation deal. We had a real nice little wedding, you know. As we married there in her sister's house, you know. And some of our more intimate friends were invited, and we had a reception up at my house, wedding cake and all that sort of thing. That was another thing too. Your grandma and I, we were rushing around on the day before the wedding, you know, driving around all. I don't remember what just exactly what we were doing. But all of a sudden, along about what was it? About 5 o'clock that afternoon, we drove up there in Martinez, and we happened to think we hadn't got the wedding cake. You know, I mean, we'd ordered it, you know, and it was already made, but we hadn't gone and got it. The bakery was probably closed, and the wedding was the next day. So there was a mad dash over to Concord to get the wedding cake. And the lady of the bakery, she had graciously waited to see if we were going to come and get it. And we did. I had a beautiful big cake, you know. It was what a big thing. That big round, you know. And it stood about that high. It had all different layers, you know, and a little bride and groom thing on top. For $5. Yeah, and we went and got that wedding cake and brought it out, and we put it on your grandma's lap. And drove all the way back to Clyde, and said we'd take it up and put it in the house on the dining room table.
Well, we had a nice reception.
Yeah, it was a nice reception.
The only thing that went kind of wrong was when, after the wedding was over, after we got married, and we started to go out, we was going to walk up the street to his folks' home. And these kids were standing there on the sidewalk with their rice, And my nephew went and threw the whole bag at us. Bag and all. He knocked my hat off.
Yeah,
What nephew
leave
was
it to
that?
Tom. Yeah, boy. Yeah, quite a
So
deal.
so tell me about the wedding night.
The wedding night.
Where was it?
Oh.
Well, we stayed there with my dad for quite a time,
Yeah.
you know, for when we first married. Yeah, our wedding night, well, yeah, yeah, as I recall. Of course, we had, after the wedding, we went down to San Francisco to see my mother. My mother was staying down there. And we come back home, and it was kind of late. And I was going to have to go to work next day. And I remember we went in and we got ready for bed. Your grandma went in the bathroom and changed into her nightgown, came back out. And first time I'd seen her in a nightgown, I was a little bit flustered, you know. I didn't. So I made some kind of a lame excuse about having to go brush my teeth. And I went in the bathroom and then brushed my teeth, which is kind of unusual for me at that time anyway. And we come back and Grandma was in bed already. So I thought long and hard about it, and I just said, okay, crawled in along that side of her. I don't know. It
Let nature take its course.
was really nice, you know. Never slept with anybody before, you know. Whoa.
Then they came down on the National Guard. He was in the National Guard.
Yeah, the National Guard. Yeah, they come up that evening, you know, just before we went to bed. And here comes the National Guard up there. They're gonna haul me in because I hadn't come over to the meeting. And I said, hey, you guys, get the heck out of here. I said, only just got married today. Oh, okay. Well, we'll consider that, you know. But, yeah.
But you had to leave for a whole week.
Yeah, that was in January though, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in January I had to go for a whole week with National Guard on maneuvers.
And that was it.
Yeah,
You
when
got
I
out of
came-
them quick.
Yeah, when I come back from the maneuvers, I decided that was enough. I dropped out of the National Guard. They were pretty nice about it.
Where did you live?
Yeah.
Where did you live right after you got married?
Where'd we live?
Yeah.
We lived with Grandpa Farnsworth. We lived with him for, let's see, from December to February
Where? What city?
in California. And then we got us a little house, found us a little house up in Brentwood, California. And so we moved up there. It was a little one-bedroom home, real nice little place.
Were you
I think it cost us $10 a month or something like that.
were you pregnant yet?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Did you know?
Hmm?
Did you know when you moved?
Yeah.
That you knew?
Here comes Dan.
Okay, stop.
Where were we?
Well, you guys just moved into your little house in where?
Brentwood.
And you're pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
And you know you're pregnant when you moved in,
Mhm.
right? So tell me about the birth of the twins. You couldn't
Oh
have
boy.
you couldn't have
What,
known
that-
they were twins until they were born, right?
No, I didn't know. Even the doctor didn't know I was going to have twins. And he said that because there was only one heartbeat. And so that morning I kind of felt funny. Of course, being the first one, I didn't know what to expect, but I guess you'd call them contractions now. And all I know was that my stomach started hurting. So we decided we'd call a doctor, and he said, well, better get her over to the hospital. Well, I don't know, how far was Stockton from Brentwood?
About 20 some miles.
that we had to go to the hospital. And it only took 6 hours in delivery. And the first one, Donnie, was born. And he was a good sized baby, 6 pound, 6 pounds. And they were washing him all up, cleaning him all up, and the nurse, who was your grandpa's cousin, and the doctor was in there washing his hands and everything, getting all cleaned up. He'd birthed the baby had come, and he was a good, healthy boy, and that was that. And finally, she said to me, she said, Kay, they called me Kay then. She said, "Are you having any pain? Any more pain?" And I said, "Yes, I was." And she says, "Well, the next one you have, you bear down, will you?" And I said, "Okay." So I did, and out popped. She said to the doctor, she says, "Hey, doc," she says, "I think we got another one here." And he come running in there, and just in time to catch the other one. He said, looks up at me, and he says, "It's a good thing I was a football player." And Daryl weighed a little over 4 pounds.
4 pounds, 14 ounces,
So,
almost 5 pounds.
So
Yeah,
neither
yeah.
baby had to be put in an incubator. They were both healthy children. But at that time, they kept you in the hospital for 9 days. And that was just the way they did things then. And it was the first twins that was born in that hospital in Stockton, California, in the Dameron Hospital, in 5 years. And the town went crazy. I had more gifts. I had fresh flowers. I had candy almost every day. More gifts coming in. Well, we filled the car full of gifts when we left the hospital. I think they gave me 14 blankets, baby blankets, and they weren't little tiny things either. And all kinds of things.
Well, you know, when they took Mom in delivery, you know, of course I was standing out there in the hallway, you know, waiting for all this to happen, and the nurse come out and said, "Well, Mr. Farnsworth's got a boy." Oh, good. So I went downstairs to where the telephone was, you know, and I was going to call my mother and tell her that she had a new grandson. Well, while I'm on the phone, they called down and said, "Well, Mr. Farnsworth, got another one up here. Twins." Holy mackerel. And I told Mom, I said, "Mom," I said, "Kay just had twins." Boom. As I recalled, my dad said that Mom's only remark was, "That darn kid never could do anything halfway." So anyway.
So what was it like having twins and?
Well, you know, we come home from the hospital. We went to our little house there in Brentwood. And boy, we wasn't there more than about a half an hour, I guess. And here come my mother and dad. And, "You are not keeping this girl up here. You are bring her back down to our house." And so we did. And I had a week off from work so that it kind of helped things along. And Mama insisted on Kay being put in bed and kept her there. And I was chief cook and bottle washer as far as diapers were concerned. And I was washing somewhere in the neighborhood of 45 diapers a day. And I mean, you didn't have them disposals then, you know, we had cloth diapers and you had to wash them. And that was my job. And it was not unusual during that week to find me out in the backyard pinning about 45 diapers on the clothesline out there. And a solar dryer, you know, we had. Yeah, well, yeah. I didn't mind, really.
Yeah, I got so tired of staying in bed. She kept me in bed for 2 weeks.
You didn't like
And I was so weak when I did get out of bed, I could hardly walk. And I said, "I want to go home." So we packed up our family and went back to Brentwood. And I took care of them myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were good babies.
Yeah, they were.
I had no problems with them at all.
Mhm.
They entertained each other. And wherever one was, the other one was. So we
Well-
had no problems at all with the twins.
The only thing was that being the first one's that way, Mom, it was a little bit short of breast milk for them too, you know, after they got up a little ways, they just couldn't handle it.
Yeah, I nursed
So
them for 4
then we,
months.
we tried to get a formula for them. And boy, we had like to have fits. I mean, we'd give them something and one kind of formula and then put them over your shoulder to burp them and they'd throw it all up. You know, and boy, having fits. And we finally settled on it up there at Brentwood, Byron, where we was then. At this one old Portuguese fellow that had a little dairy out there on the edge of town. And he had this one Guernsey cow, and it was very rich milk. And we found that by using a modifier, you know, a milk modifier that you could buy and putting a little modifier with that particular cow's milk, the twins could handle it. And they began to assimilate it and get better. That in itself was real funny. We used to buy our milk from him before the twins were born. Yeah. Yeah. Old Louis, he was typical Portuguese, you know, I mean, and I know I'd go out there, he'd say, "Hey, Don, does that cow of yours have that calf yet?" "No, not yet, Lou." So then when the twins were born, I went out there to get this milk, you know, and he asked me the same question, you know, "Does that cow have that calf yet?" I said, "Yeah, Lou." I said, "That two." "Two? By golly darn, that's a good cow. You better hang on to that one." Yeah. You know, that's funny. That old man he had 4 kids of his own. And he had that little dairy, and that's all he had. Yeah. And he put all 4 of those kids through college for that little dairy. And as each one of them graduated from high school, he bought them a brand new Buick. Yeah, they were very frugal people, and I guess they knew how to handle their money.
So then Nancy came along, right?
Mhm. Yeah, the twins were 11 months old when Nancy was born. She was premature. And she was just a little over 7 months. And when she was born, she was a home delivery. When the doctor came, he'd been drinking, and so Don wouldn't. He tried to hold the baby back. She was ready to come.
Oh
and
boy!
He tried to hold her back, and so he just.
I
Your
threw him
grandpa
out.
threw him out of the house and
I delivered Nan.
and delivered Nancy.
Yeah, the cord was wrapped around her neck twice, and she was just as blue as a pair of overalls. And God, I got the cord unwrapped around her neck and picked her up by the heels. I got spat her on the butt, and nope, didn't work. So I'd heard someplace, I'd read someplace, I think it was in Irene's books on obstetrics, that it would take a shock, you know. So I ran in, and the only thing I think I was going to reach, ran in, got the ice tray out of the refrigerator, and I remember I just grabbed it out of the refrigerator and threw it on the floor, busted it open, you know, got the 4 or 5 ice cubes, and I run back in, and I took those ice cubes and run them right up her back. And she started squalling, and she ain't shut up since.
Yeah, our landlady came over and she was helping us. She had never even experienced. She had
Yeah,
some children, but
didn't know
they had
nothing,
put her
boy.
out.
She was scared to death.
But she cleaned Nancy all up. Took her
Yeah.
into the kitchen, cleaned her all up.
Well,
But Nancy didn't have any eyelashes or eyebrows or fingernails or toenails. You could see where they was going to be, but they weren't there.
yeah, she was. Oh, she was pretty healthy though. Other than that, and yeah, well, when it come time to, you know, I had to cut the cord, you know, I didn't know. Went and got this shoestring and I boiled it on the stove. Cleaned it and I tied it right next to Nancy's nail, just about so far off from her tummy, and then tied it again, and then cut the cord between the two knots. And I had to go ahead with a cleanup, you know, and all that stuff. I was terrified.
Then
And,
Irene put them silver nitrate in her.
Well, they're supposed to put, when a baby was born, now this is, I guess this is a federal law, they're supposed to put arginol in that baby's eyes. And this is a disinfectant, you know, to prevent infection of the eyes, which can happen, I guess. And he didn't do it, you know, of course he was gone. So, it was the next day that Irene come up there, wasn't it? And my sister, she was a registered nurse. And she come in and she checked Dolly, checked her all over, checked Grandma all over. We'd done everything right, apparently. She was fine. The baby was fine. And Irene asked me, she says, did the doctor put any arginol in the baby's eyes? Silver nitrate. I said, no, she didn't put anything in them. Oh. She said, well, I'll be right back. And she went back downtown Byron, or Brentwood, I guess she went over there, got the arginol from it. And she would come out and she put the arginol in the baby's eyes, and then she left again and she went down to that doctor's office, and about 2 days later he took his sign down off his door and left. He had broke a federal law, and she told him so. Yeah, I mean, when labor started there, and I knew things were happening, they were happening fast, you know.
Almost had her in the...
Yeah, and this damn doctor, he went in the front room and sit down on the couch and was going to go to sleep. Oh, it won't happen for hours, you know, and about that time, why, you could see the baby's head starting to show. And I yelled at him and told him, you know, and he come running in. He went in the bathroom, started to wash his hands, and he says, hold it back, hold it back. Well, hell, there was no holding that baby back. It was on its way. That's when I got mad and I threw him out.
Yeah, I had to go to the bathroom, so I sit down and the water broke. And I knew I had to get back to that bed real fast because I knew the baby was coming. And I made it back to the bed, but I almost had her in the door.
She was another real good baby.
But
too.
it was an easy delivery, except that she had turned somehow, and the cord had wrapped around her neck. But
well, you got that took care of.
yeah,
God.
So then, when did Dallas come along?
Dwayne was.
Well, you know, I think one of the things that kind of saved us on that was that when my sister was going to her nurse's training at Fabiola Hospital, and she always brought her books home, you know, to study books. And I was fascinated by those books, and you know, they had a lot of good stuff in them, you know, and particularly the one on obstetrics. I don't know why that one struck me, but I read that book from cover to cover. You know, just reading all the stuff in there about delivery, children, and all that stuff. It was fascinating to me. Young kid, I was, of course, at the time, I was only about 13 or 14. But it was interesting to me. Had a lot of big words. I'd come across one and I'd go get the dictionary and see what it meant. And most of the time I'd have to wait until Irene come home and ask her how to pronounce it.
Yeah, after Nancy was born, then shortly after she was born, we moved into to Byron.
Yeah.
And we lived there in Byron for, let's see. The twins were walking. Nancy was just beginning to walk.
Yeah.
So we must have lived there for about 1.5 years or 2 years. And then just war come along, and of course he was drafted into the service.
No, I wasn't drafted. I went and enlisted.
Well, you would have been drafted though,
Yeah.
if you hadn't have.
Well, I enlisted in the Air Force, and then when you had Butch, you know, and it paralyzed your hips, you know, then he sent me home on a dependency discharge.
Yeah, I was pregnant by the time he went into the service. And I went down to Clyde to live, and I stayed with his dad, because his mother was in a rest home at the time. She had a stroke, and so I stayed with your grandpa's dad and the twins and Nancy, and then my mother came up to see us, and she talked me into going back to Grangeville with her. And so my sister was there with her boy at the same time. So we packed up my things and we went to Grangeville, Idaho, where Dwayne was born. And we went there, we went to Grangeville in May. And Dwayne was born in June, the 2nd of June.
So what was
I hadn't been in Grangeville more than about 3 weeks before he was born.
What was his delivery like?
His delivery, he was actually the hardest one I had. About I would say probably about 8 hours. And I had a chiropractor. It was a home delivery, and I had a chiropractor for my doctor. And if it hadn't have been for him, Dwayne would have probably been an instrument baby. But as it was, Dr. Kale knew what he was doing, and he kept massaging and helped me through the contractions. And Dwayne was born naturally. And he weighed almost 10 pounds. Yeah, he was a big baby. But I remember a remark right after he was born. My brother was staying there with my oldest brother was staying with my folks at the same time. And he came home from work that night, and he took one look at Dwayne laying in his bassinet, and he says, "Man, Superboy," because he had girls. He didn't have.
So how did the nickname Butch come along?
I really don't know. We just started calling him Butch, didn't we?
Yeah.
I don't really.
It just seemed to kind of fit him, you know.
It just kind of fit him, you know. Or maybe it was because he had a butch haircut or something. I don't know. But it just more or less fit.
Big husky kid all the way through, you know. I mean, just seemed like Butch kind of fit him. Yeah.
So then next came
Dallas came next, and
yeah, Dal was born while I was still in the Navy.
Yeah, when they found out that I was having hip trouble after Dwayne was born, because he was so big, it kind of dislocated my joints, and the service discharged your grandpa to come home because I needed him at home.
That's when I was in the Air Force, Mom.
Yeah.
Army Air Corps.
And so he got a job with Matson Navigation on that.
Yeah.
I went to work for Matson Navigation in Oakland. And he was working there when he was, what was it,
Well, I was only home from the Air Force. I come home in October, and the draft board gave me they sent me a card in the latter part of November. They sent me a draft card. It was a 3A classification, which was an occupational deferment. And I was supposed to have like 4F. I mean, you know, no touch him, leave him alone. And so I called draft board on it, and they said, well, don't worry about it. And everybody gets reclassified in December, and we'll give you a new card in January. And they did, and it was 1A, and that's right at the top of the list, you know. I went to see about getting back in the Air Force, Army Air Corps, and this personnel officer that I knew real well, and I talked to him about it. He said, yeah, he said, you could probably come back in, Don, but he said, couldn't come back in here at advanced flying where he was. You'd have to go back to primary, start back through again. And he said, you'd never make it through primary, Don. He says, they're washing out on quota restrictions now. And I said, well, you is. I said, I don't really want to go in the walking army. I said, what do you suggest? So he gave me a letter of introduction and a recommendation, and told me to take that down to San Francisco to the Navy, this in the tower building there. And so I did. I took it in there, and this lieutenant commander, and he was very nice. And we talked it over, and he looked at my record, you know, and military record, and he said, they signed me up right now. And then the draft board called me, and they wanted me to report for physical, you know, and I went up there and told them, I said, I just, you can't call me in for physical for the walking army. I said, I already signed up for the Navy. And, well, I didn't know about this one guy in there. He was getting real belligerent. And this little gal that was in there, she's got kind of smart. And she asked me, she said, what was that the office that you were talking about? And I said, the office of Naval Procurement in San Francisco. I said, and I said, ask for Lieutenant Commander, I remember, Larry. So she did. She called him. Boy, I guess that guy, old Larry, come up and went up one side of that guy there in the draft office and down the other. Something about to wit, absconding with naval personnel. So they left me alone. And the Navy called me about a month later. I went down in the Navy.
So where were you living at the time that was all going on?
Yeah.
We were living in Clyde. Not Clyde, but Niles.
Niles, yeah. I was living there with my dad there in Niles.
So then Dallas came?
That was Dallas. And when he was on leave from the Navy when Dallas was born. And so we had to have, Dallas was born in San Jose.
Yeah.
And we started out in his dad's car. And we ended up hitchhiking.
Well,
A long
started out in my
story.
dad's car and they got down there just out of Niles there a little ways, about 10 miles, I guess, and that dang car, it threw a rod. So boy, I was frantic. I got out in the middle of the road, and that first car come along. I got right out in front of it, slagged him down. He stopped. It was another sailor. So we loaded her in there with my mom and I. And mom was sitting right next to that sailor, you know. And every time she'd have one of those pains, she'd stiffen up a little bit like that, and that sailor would look over at her, and his eyes got bigger. Boy, he was really booking it. We got into San Jose, and just in time to got her into the hospital.
Yeah, the elevator stuck.
The elevator stuck.
Yeah, we got into the elevator, and the elevator stuck, and it took them a few minutes to get that working. And by the time I got up to the delivery room, it was about 5 minutes, and the baby was born. Poor little sailor, when they called down there and told him that
Wow.
the baby was there, he, whew, that soon?
Yeah. Hey. And then I had to go back and tell Dad the car was busted down. He'd have to put a new rod into it. And so, about that time I had to go back to the Navy.
Mm-hmm.
So you had 5 kids then at this point.
Yep.
So did you think that was a pretty big family at that time?
Well, I don't know.
Mm.
It seemed like we got along okay.
Mm-hmm.
We never gave it too much thought, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I figured, well, my mom had 12. I could have a large family too. And then the next one to be born was, well, after Dallas was born,
It was Dale.
Yeah, we moved,
That was after the war was
yeah,
over.
we moved back to Idaho. Went back to Idaho.
Yeah, I got,
I was living in Idaho when I went back to Idaho. And when he was discharged from the Navy, what was that, 45?
yeah,
I was, he came to Idaho. And it was in July the 14th that Dale was born. We bought us a little house, well, good house. It was a 3-bedroom house up there. What was it we paid for that place?
mm,
What was it we paid for that little house we got there in Idaho?
oh, the old Eagle place,
Yeah,
$3,500.
yeah. It was really something too, 'cause it was a 2-bedroom place. I mean, a two-story house.
Yeah,
And it had a big front room and a big dining room and a big kitchen downstairs, and then it had and a bedroom downstairs, and it had 2 bedrooms upstairs.
2 bedrooms upstairs, yeah.
And then they had a little balcony that came off of the upstairs, where you go out onto the balcony. And then it had downstairs there was a porch that went all the way around. It was all screened in.
And the wood shed was built right onto the back of the house. It was all one big shed out there. You could go right straight out there, and the big old bathroom.
It was a real nice house.
The front room, I remember the front room. It had one of those what they call a bay window. It was built out, with a kind of a bench there in front of it. Yeah, it was a pretty nice old place. It was a real old house and real nice.
Yeah, that's where the twins went to first grade. And they had to go right by my mother's house. And my mother was constantly making them late for school because she just didn't think I fed them enough, and she'd bring them in and give them a second breakfast. And I got heck for it from the principal until I found out what my mother was doing. I followed them one day, and they didn't know I was following them. And I found out what Mama was doing. I told her, I said, Mom, you just can't do this. I said, they're being late for school. Well, I just wanted to make sure they had enough to eat. I said, they get enough to eat
at home.
I said, they get their breakfast at home.
Yeah, geez.
Because I didn't work. I had plenty to do at home.
Yeah.
So
So how long did you live there?
I was flying for Grangeville Air Service for a sum total of $200 a month.
Yeah, we moved there, 40, when you got home from the service, about
What?
46.
Yeah, 46 we moved down to
And then we moved to
Kennewick.
Kennewick. How much was you making when you was working for there in Grangeville?
Huh?
How much?
Grangeville, $200 a month.
And so then he got this offer of a job in Kennewick, and was $400, wasn't it?
$400 a month.
Gee, that
Dude,
was,
that was-
wow,
that
you
was-
know. So we loaded up everything, and we moved to Kennewick. Well, and there Peggy was born in 48.
Mm.
And that was another quick trip to the hospital.
Well, that was in '48. That was the year of the
Year
flood.
of the flood, the Columbia River.
Columbia River flooded, and well, we got her over to hospital before the bridge went out, and but then while Mama was there in the hospital that night, the bridge went out. So we were going to bring her home the next day, So I jumped in that old Blue Goose suspension, and I took off and flew over to Pasco, and went down to, borrowed this guy's car there at the airport, and I went down to the hospital, get Mama and Peggy and take them home. And those sisters, they were just absolutely flabbergasted. You mean you're going to take that baby up in an airplane and she's only a day old? Yeah, sure am. I took Mama back out to the airport, and we got in the airplane. I took off, and on the way back, I buzzed down over the hospital and rocked my wings, and the sisters were out there watching, waved.
Yeah, she was born in June of 1948, and in September of 1949 was when I had her sister Nancy.
Susan.
Susan. And
Susan was born in Olympia.
yeah, she was born in Olympia.
Wow, let me tell you about that one, Mary. That was something else. See, we lived there in Olympia. I didn't have any car. And we lived in Tumwater, which is a suburb of Olympia. And matter of fact, we lived just up the hill from the Olympia beer brewery. And we made this deal with a cab company, you know, that come the time to take Mama to the hospital, I'd call it and get this cab, come get us. And what we was going to do was that we wanted a cab driver that we made this deal with, this older woman that lived in Olympia, that she'd come babysit while we were in the hospital. So cab driver was, his idea was for him to come out from the cab stand, pick up the babysitter and come on out the house. Well, on the appointed evening, I called the cab driver and told him, okay, let's do it, get that cab out here. So he come out to the house, he forgot the babysitter. So he had to go back and get her. Back out, left the babysitter there. And by that time things were rapidly progressing, and I got Mama in there in the cab. And poor old Ray, I remember he was a cab driver, I'm telling you. He took one look at Mama and he thought, whoa, you ain't gonna have this baby in my cab. And we started down Capitol Way in Olympia. And I remember looking down at the speedometer and it said 90 miles an hour, and he was on the radio calling for a cop. And the cop come out the other direction. He went past us and cut a hooker right in the middle of the road, and he tried to never did catch us. And I remember looking down at that speedometer hovering up there and 90 miles an hour, and I could see 4th Street coming, Olympic, Capitol Way, dead-ended into 4th Street. And you had to make a 90-degree turn. And I see 4th Street coming, and I thought, oh no, and I shut my eyes, and when I opened them, we were headed up 4th Street towards hospital, and how he made that corner, I'll never know. And God, it was sirens going, you know, and everything. And got her up to hospital. We're in the elevator, sent her up, and I'm standing there in the office there of the hospital, you know, filling out the papers and everything. And old Ray, he's standing there watching, you know, and they called down and said, Mr. Farnsworth, you having a baby girl? And old Ray looked at me and he said, oh, already? And he's collapsed into a chair. I mean, and afterwards he told me, he says, Farnsworth, after this, he says, the next time, if there is a next time, is don't call a cab, get an ambulance. And the thing of it was, we'll send a notice to Mama's mother, you know, another granddaughter, and she already knew it. They heard it on the radio. Evidently, it caused quite a stir. You know. There's a race with the stork. Yeah. Brought Susie home and put her in an apple box.
That was her bed.
Yeah. Yeah, that wasn't much of a house that we lived in up there in Tumwater.
But then we moved into
Had a lot of fun there.
We moved into that nice little house downtown.
Yeah, moved down. Well, we moved down to that little house down there just above the brewery, and and then we went from there. We moved into that guy's house there in Olympia.
Olympia, big house.
And that's when I went. I quit Abe and I went to work up there at McCord Field up there in 325th Maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
And I was on engine change for C-54s, and they were on that Korean airlift. We were running them out of there.
So tell me about when Carol came along.
When Carol came along,
Hmm?
yeah, well, we had when we moved from Olympia to Carson City,
Yeah.
and of course your grandpa went first. He had a job there, and so he went first, and I was to join him. And the Salvation Army come up, God bless them, and they bought all of my old furniture and stuff like that, and gave me the money and got me a bus ticket. I had what, eight then,
Yeah.
and I took them on the bus from Olympia, Washington to Carson City, Nevada, and I didn't have one bit of trouble. The older ones helped take care of the little ones, and we had no problem when we'd get off the bus. They'd go to the bathroom, and they'd wash up, we'd have a lunch, and get back on the bus again. And we were living in a little place called New Empire when Carol was born.
Yeah.
And it was out in the country from Carson. And when I had to go to the hospital with Carol, when we got to the hospital door was locked. We had called the doctor, and he was to meet us there, but we beat him there. And the hospital door was locked, but we finally managed to raise somebody to get into the hospital. There was people inside, you know. And when the doctor came, he was wearing his Mackinaw and his galoshes.
It was winter.
And it was cold outside. And I remember Grandpa was holding me in his arms, and this one gal was, well, what do you want? And he says, well, she's gonna have a baby, you darn fool, let me in. And I was only in the hospital for about 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I just made it to the delivery room when Carol was born. And then
Yeah.
I was there for 12 hours in the hospital.
Carol
I
was
was
another.
home.
Yeah, Carol was another one of them husky babies, you know. And I don't remember now what she weighed.
I mean, Carol only weighed about 8 pounds.
Yeah, about 8
Peggy
pounds.
and Dwayne were the big babies.
But you know what was funny about it was that Carol was the first one that I saw him. They put her in one of those respirator things,
Yeah.
you know, and there was the plastic cover over it. You know.
Incubator.
Yeah, and she was laying in there, and she was kicking, and her hands were going like this, you know, and just raising all kinds of heck, and she was shaking that whole thing. And I turned around and told the nurse, I said, you better get her out of there before she tears that thing apart. I said, I ain't gonna pay for it. Yeah.
So we took her home in 12 hours. She was only 12 hours old when we took her home. And I think it was at 2 o'clock that afternoon I was out there hanging up clothes on the clothesline.
Yep.
Where were you?
He was working.
I was working for Lynn Roberts and whatnot.
Then he got a better job in Minterfield.
Hmm?
Now from Carson City we moved to Minterfield and
Yeah, Minterfield. Yeah, I
down by
went to,
Bakersfield.
I was working back there again. That was for Transocean again, wasn't it? We were working in a shop, and we were training the Indonesian Air Force. And I was instructing in AT-6s, and finished that program there. And Mom and I, we had got an apartment there in this. It was a kind of
They were nice apartments.
a housing complex, you know. It had been a military base, you know, and they changed the barracks into apartments, and so we got one. And Transocean, they finished up that program there with the Indonesian Air Force, and they started selling the airplanes off, and they had a whole bunch of real nice Stearmans. And of course, those were gobbled up immediately by the crop dusting outfits around, you know. And they wound up, they had 12 AT-6s there. Well, they sold them to the Arabian government. And these Arabs come over there, and Saudi Arabia, and they come down there, and this one guy that came with them, he was just a little bit sharp. He knew exactly what he was looking at, you know. And so he pointed out things he wanted done to the airplanes. Some of them were 12-volt systems, some of them had 24-volt systems on them. So he wanted them all 24 volts. So we had to change those all over, and had to go all through them, you know, really clean them up. And all new instruments, we insisted all new instruments in there, full panel, and low freq radio, fine. And then the first one we turned out, why, of course, he insisted that the aircraft be armed, you know. We had this one, the first one we turned out, we had a 30 caliber Browning machine gun mounted underneath the cowl there in the front cockpit, and twin Brownings on a swivel mount in the rear cockpit, stowed down. I remember that one, boy. They painted an export number on it. Instead of an NC number, they had an export number on the side. So I had to fly over to, from Minard Field, I had to fly over to Berkeley to Bakersfield Municipal to get some gas. So I flew over there, and this kid come up there, and he was servicing the airplane, you know, and this FAA inspector, and I knew him real well, he come down there, and I was standing on the wing there waiting for this kid to fill it up with gas. And he come up, and of course I had one 130 caliber machine gun mounted in the wing down on the left side. And this FAA inspector, he stepped up there, and he had his arm draped over that gun barrel, talking to me. And all of a sudden it dawned on him what he was looking at, this damn machine gun sticking up. And he says, grab that gun by both hands like this, and he looked at it like that, and he looked up at me, and he says, what in the heck have we got here, you know? And I said, well, this is a machine gun, you dang fool, way to think it is. And he said, you mean that airplane's armed? And I said, well, yeah. I said, there ain't got any bullets in it, but I said, there's a machine gun there in the wing, and I said, another one up here in the cowl, and I said, we've got twin guns there in the rear cockpit. Don't move that airplane. Leave it right there. And so he called down at the regional office in Los Angeles, and they were just like the flow at top, you know, here's a civilian flying an armed aircraft across the United States. No, you don't do that. So they had a heck of a hullabaloo over it, and it seems though that Transocean had got permission from the State Department, but they hadn't notified the FAA, you know, and there was a lack of communication there somewhere. So finally they decided, well, it would be all right, but the machine gun in the wing had to be taken out, the one in the cowl had to be taken out, and then placed on the floor of the rear cockpit and tied down with one of those steel tapes, you know, and the same for the machine guns that were in the rear cockpit. They had to be put down there and taped to the floor with that steel tape. And they had bomb racks under it, and they concluded that the bomb racks in themselves did not pose as armament, you know. And then when we got all that done, well, then it was permissible to go ahead and fly it. I flew all 12 of those AT-6s back to Linden, New Jersey, and had to land them there at Linden. And Linden, New Jersey, that's where they pull the wings off, crate them up, ship them to Saudi Arabia. And yeah, I had some pretty good experiences there too, you know. This one in particular, they wanted me to go to a little town called Gainesville, in northern Texas, because Gainesville, there was a little shop there that was building up another AT-6 on the same contract, and they wanted to see the ones that we were turning out, see what they had to do. So I popped into Gainesville, and I had to stay there overnight while these guys looked at that one. And when I got up the next day, it had clouded up and it was raining, you know, and I thought, well, okay, I don't have any problems. So I went in and flew into Oklahoma City to gas up. And when I landed at Oklahoma City, I had an 800-foot, what they call an indefinite ceiling, and rain. And so I went in, they gassed up my airplane for me and got it serviced it. And I went in and I was going to file a flight plan from there to Joplin, Missouri. And I told him, I says, I have to file this flight plan as VFR, that's Visual Flight Rules. And this guy looked at me, he says, come on, man. He said, I can't clear you from this office down to the ramp, VFR. He said, I said, well, I said, you and I both know. I said, this is instrument. But I says, I have to file a flight plan as VFR because of the insurance on the airplane. But I said, I got to get that damn airplane back to Linden, New Jersey. I said, it has to get in there to time to be shipped. And he kind of stuck his tongue in his cheek and said, well, okay, if that's what you want. So he filed it. I took off from Oklahoma City, and I followed a railroad track kind of out of there, you know, just flying along, following a railroad track. And all of a sudden I found myself, I was down there about 100 feet off the ground, and I thought, man, there's radio towers around here that's a heck of a lot higher than this. So I went on Axtell Instruments, and I pulled up into this stuff, and I started climbing, and I got up to about 12,000 feet, and I was still in it. And I started picking up ice. And well, there's no place here, so I dove back down. And I got down to 2,000 feet, and I lost the ice and blanked. I mean, I couldn't even see. I had a little, the radio antenna mast stood about that far outside the windshield in the front of it. I couldn't even see it. It was that fogged in, I mean, blank. You're in a cloud, you know. And I'm on instruments and flying along there, and I tuned in on one of the Tulsa radio stations, and I was homing on that. And I had this what they call radio compass on there. They'd been home on that station. Well, that's fine, except for one thing, that every time there was a lightning flash out through those clouds somewhere, that radio compass would swing around and point at the lightning flash. So I had set my gyro compass to take care of that. My magnetic compass up there, hell, every time one of those lightning flashes would go away, that thing would sit up there and spin, you know. And I was on that gyro compass most of the time, and my flight attitude indicator, turning artificial horizon, and I stayed right with it. And when I come out of those clouds, I just popped right out of those clouds like a cork out of a bottle, you know, just boom, like that, clear, you know. And I was right over the middle of Tulsa. And I flew on into Joplin, Missouri with it. And then there was another one that I had to take, and I took it east, and they wanted me to go the northern route because they wanted me to take it up to Windsor Locks, Connecticut, because they were turning out 2 more AT-6s up there, and they wanted to see one of ours, so they'd know what they had to do. So, yeah, I flew it up, and I stopped in Buffalo, you know, to gas up in Buffalo, New York. I took off in Buffalo, and I got to thinking, you know, yeah, that Lake Erie there, and that's Niagara Falls was right over here, see. So I flew down, and I took a damn good look at Niagara Falls. In fact, dropped right down the canyon and flew right up over the face of the falls like that. And then I quickly made my exit so nobody get any numbers. And I went on into Windsor Locks, and I was there for, I think it was 3 days that I stayed in Windsor Locks. I had to, they had me test fly both of the AT-6s there, you know, after they got through working on them. And then they was going to have me fly one, and then they had this other pilot there that who was gonna fly the other one down there. So, and I was gonna have to go down, when I got to Linden, I had to catch a feeder line back to Windsor Locks to get the third one and bring it back down. And we got down there to, I remember that guy, he hadn't flown an AT-6, he'd been flying like flying DC-4s all the time, you know, big 4-engine transport. And he called that T-6, you know, oh boy. And we got down to Linden and the wind was blowing in off the Hudson River. And we had to use the short runway. And in order to come in on that short runway, you had to come in over a 75-foot power line. And you dropped in over that power line and you immediately just dropped it right down. And so I saw it, and I circled around, I saw what I had to do, and I pointed it out to him, you know, best I could. I squared off, come in over the power line, flared out, dropped one wing, skidded down like that, flattened her out, put her on, immediately got on the brakes, got her stopped, whirled around, got back out. I looked up, and he was up there circling in orbit. And he finally squared off, and he come in, and he did a pretty presentable job of it, all right. He didn't slip it like I did, you know. He come in right over that and dumped her down like that. And of course, he picked up a little speed when he did, and he put her on, and I could hear those brakes squalling all the way down that damn runway. And he damn near went off the end, boy. I mean, he just got her stopped in time, turned around, come back up, and he got out of that airplane, and he was white. He says, man, he says, never again.
And while he was flying airplanes, I was there in Minner Field. And at that time, we had the big earthquake down there in Bakersfield.
Yeah.
And I was alone with the kids. And I never want to go through that again. That's worse than having a baby. And then Estelle came along.
Yes.
He was all his flying transpired in about a year. And within a year, he got those planes all flown back to New Jersey. And
Was he home very much when he was flying?
pardon?
Was he home very much while he was flying? Or?
Just long enough to eat and sleep and get up and go fly again, you know. And then with Estelle, we'd thought, well, we would make arrangements with the county hospital in Bakersfield to have her. It was a nice big hospital, you know. And there was another quick delivery, and I was in a ward with other women. And then when Grandpa came up to visit me, my gosh, he said there was piles of dirty clothes laying in the hallway, and it was
Land all over, you know.
and it was terrible. I remember there was a young Negro girl, and she had a baby, and her breast was swollen so hard with milk, and they weren't showing her how to expel it at all.
Yeah, pump it.
And she didn't know how to use a breast pump, and I told him, I said, for crying out loud, I said, get a breast pump for that girl, I'll show her how. And I went over and pumped her breast out for her.
Well, yeah, they wouldn't let the mothers breastfeed their babies there.
Yeah,
they were feeding them goat's milk.
Mm-hmm.
And I come in there and I found that out, and I said, what the hell are you talking about? You are not about to feed my daughter goat's milk, not when my wife has an ample supply of breast milk for her. I said, every one of our kids have been breastfed, and this one's not going to be any exception. Well, this is a hospital policy. I said, bundle her up, I'm taking her home. And I did.
He took me home.
And that
They
was
wanted me
with
to
Estelle.
sign a release so that they would not be
See,
responsible.
that was in 52.
I told me that was it.
She was born in 52.
Yeah.
And then in 54, Dan came along.
Yeah. Yeah, there was one. Boy.
And we went to Mercy Hospital at that time.
Yeah.
It was a Catholic hospital.
Went into Bakersfield, I was driving my car, that old Woody station wagon, wasn't it? And it was, what was that, about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning?
Yeah,
Gee.
real early.
Yeah, I know. 'Cause I was headed down Main Street in Bakersfield, and I was praying for a cop, because I didn't really know where that hospital was. And I was going wide. I must have been doing about 85 or 90 miles an hour down that Main Street. Not a cop in sight nowhere. You couldn't find one. So I found the hospital, and I got there, and they had this scaffolding and stuff built up around the main entrance of the hospital, and the main entrance was closed. And guy went around and around the hospital twice to find this side entrance, you know. So I run up there into the side entrance, and I told him, I said, my wife's out there in the car, and I said, well, she's about to have a baby. I said, we better hurry. And I had told the doctor that, I says, you know, I says, well, she has babies, man. I says, when she's ready to go, you better be there. And I told him, I says, I'm going to call you before I leave to go to the hospital. I said, you better get going. So when I got to the hospital, he wasn't there. And it took Danny, I guess Danny was more in the elevator, wasn't he? On the way up. And I was sitting there in the office, you know, filling out the papers, you know. And the doctor finally come in, you know, he come in. And he says, has Mrs. Farnsworth been here yet? And I looked at him and I said, Doc, I told you if you were following me, you're too damn late. I said, yeah, the baby's here already. It's already been done. I said, they've already took care of it. I said, so I said, you can turn around and go home if you want. I said, same token, Doc, I said, don't send me a bill.
He didn't either.
He says, oh, how disappointed. I said, yeah, I know. Goodbye.
Then he came over to get me at the hospital. I think they kept me there for 3 days. And he came over to get me. And
With all the kids.
he brought all the kids. And they were all standing there in the waiting room waiting for me to come out. And they wheeled me out with the new baby. And they were all just being so nice until Nancy. She says, well, I want to go see my new brother. And here they came. And they just swarmed around me, you know, looking at the new baby.
Oh man, those sisters
And
thought
the
that was
sisters
great.
are just a beaming. They thought that was the grandest thing that ever happened. Well, they got me out of the car, out to the car, and at one time they were going to put me in with the kids until they realized that I was the mother, not the kid. And then they called Grandpa back into the hospital, and I thought, oh boy, now what? Well, they gave him back $85 because he didn't use the delivery room. So we got a rebate on them.
Yeah. Yeah, I went from there.
And that was in '54. Then we moved to Visalia, California. And Patty, our youngest and the last one, was born in '57. And
Yeah.
she was another one that was quick. Only I was going to do everything just right. I was going to notify them
Well, we
ahead of
did.
time, and I was going to get to the hospital in plenty of time, you know, so it wouldn't be a quickie or anything like that. And we did. I was having some pretty good pains though. And when they got me into the hospital, and then they took me in the back room and they gave me something that put me to sleep and knocked the pains out. But we found out later that the doctor's wife was in there having a baby and he wanted to be with her.
And they stopped the labor.
He stopped the labor on me.
So I told them. They brought Mama out, and I could see Mama was mad. And I told them, I says, I'm going to tell you something. I said, 8 o'clock tonight, I'm going to bring that woman down here. And I said, you better have every door open to the delivery, from the emergency entrance there to the delivery room. Because I said, you ain't going to have time to mind. And they just kind of snickered, yeah. All right. So we went home. Mama mixed up her castor oil cocktail and downed it. And she went to walking back and forth. And we got the labor going. And it was funny. exactly 8 o'clock, I had her down there at that emergency door. And I went up and I knocked on it, and the nurse come there, and I says, better get the gurney and bring it out here at the car. I says, she's about to have that baby. And she said, oh, well, these things take what? I said, you ain't got time to argue, gal. I said, get out there. And we got the gurney out there and went to lift Mama out of the car, and the water broke. I said, you better hurry. So I went in around the front of the hospital, and I was in the office there, and this doctor come out, and he says, well, I understand that I'm not handling this case to suit you. And I said, well, Doc, I said, we ain't got time to argue about it. I said, my wife's in delivery. And I said, you better, if you're going to deliver that baby, you better get in there. Well, I said, I think you ought to get another doctor. I said, we ain't got time. I said, you want to deliver that baby? I said, get in there and deliver it. About that time, this nurse comes in and says, doctor, you better get in here. So he goes in, and he went ahead and delivered Patty. And I was standing there in this waiting room, you know, and he comes walking back out after the delivery, you know, and he comes to the door of the delivery room, and he says, well, Farnsworth, I delivered your kid. You can go look at it if you want to. And I mean, I come right off the floor. And I grabbed him right by the shirt front, and I told him, I said, you don't talk to me like that, mister. I said, you talking to me, you're talking to a white man, and don't you damn well forget it. And he started to make some kind of a slurring remark, and I threw him clear across the waiting room, and he lit with his head in the magazine rack. And got up off the floor, and they were going to, the head nurse said she called the cops. And the cop that come down there, he happened to be a guy named Dale DeArmond, and I used to do all the reloading for Dale. And he come in, and he wanted to know what went on. And everybody there in the waiting room, they said, well, that doctor got a lousy mouth. And she said, I don't blame that young man for doing what he did. And so Dale, he asked me about it, and I told him, I said, I told him exactly what the doctor said. I said, come up the door there, and then it makes a remark like, well, I delivered your kid, you know, like, gee. And the armor turned around and looked at the doctor, and he says, well, I said, what did Don tell you? And the doctor said, he told me to get out of town. And he looked at him and said, well, I'll tell you what, if I was you, I'd damn well do it. And he left. Dr. Gates, wasn't
Yeah. And I wasn't there very long when they came.
I told him, I said, don't you come near my wife again. I said, you leave her alone. That's when I got Dr. Cherney.
Yeah.
And I had him come in and look you over.
So what was it that made you decide that 12 was enough?
Well, after Patty was born, while Mama was still in the hospital, I went over to see this doctor. What was it? Where was it?
Twynham.
Huh? Twynham, yeah.
Twynham.
Yeah, I went over to see Dr. Twynham, you know, and I told him that I thought it was expedient that I would like to have a vasectomy. And he says, looked at me and he said, well, you know, I'm only 36 years old. And well, he's a young fellow like you. He said, you don't really want something like that now. And I said, Doc, I said, my wife is over in the hospital right now with number 12. He said, go right in there.
Yeah.
No argument.
That's good.
I don't see how. I need a microcellular scanner. Help me. Monsieur.
He's gonna take care of you. You're gonna be all right.
Julian, come help me.
told you.
Yeah.
That's too thick, Mom. That's way too thick. Gee. Dude.
Well, here, you make it.
Huh?
You do it.
You're gonna have your morning communion?
Too thick?
Dad's having his morning communion.
Yeah.
Okay. Salt palmetto.
I heard it.
And I brought the music.
For a minute, I thought you got out with your violin.
What?
I left my violin at home.
Get out of the video.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, you know, and so Susan is up against some real stiff competition. I mean, she lost to somebody who was really undeserving, and actually a whole lot of loss. But she, you know, well, you know, it's like that. She goes, you know, I'm nominated. That alone. That's not, that's not. You know, but I feel sorry for her in the look.
Why?
I'm liable to cut my finger.
I was surprised that, what's his name, from General Hospital did this. That was kind of cool.
Oops. Almost cut
When
my
I
fingernail.
heard, because I would watch it, but when I heard this performance last year, I haven't watched any of them before.
Don't.
When I get a chance to watch it all.
Turning number 3 or whatever.
Do a little dance. Do a little dance.
Down to the north part of the river. Yes, just take
Those are done.
We had no choice. We were dying.
Mmm. Chicken.